Camping is a fun experience, but when you're camping alone in the dark, strange things can happen out there, and here's one that still gives me goosebumps. I had been planning the trip for months. I'd converted my Jeep into a camping rig with just a platform bed in the back, a cooler, a portable stove, and some storage. My goal was to drive from Montana all the way up to Alaska, taking the Yukon highway. Everyone warned me how remote it was. The gas stations are hundreds of miles apart, and you'd drive without seeing another soul for hours. That was exactly what I wanted. 2 months of freedom, nothing but the open road and the mountains. The one thing that bothered me, though, was crossing into Canada. Back home, I usually kept a few safety tools tucked under my seat for emergencies. Out here, I wasn't allowed to bring any of that across the border. All I had were my instincts and some basic camping gear. I told myself it was fine. After all, what could happen way out in the middle of nowhere? The first couple of days were easy. Long drives, amazing scenery, and quiet nights parked on forest pull-offs. By the third day, though, I had my first bad feeling. I pulled off late one evening into a small campsite off the road. Nobody else was there, just me and the trees. I was too tired to look around, so I parked, put up my window covers, and crashed. The next morning, I noticed a little trail leading off into the woods. I figured I'd stretch my legs before driving again. The trail wound about 5 minutes into the forest and opened up to another campsite. That's when I froze. The site looked as though it had been abandoned in a hurry, with chairs overturned, trash scattered, and a sleeping bag half buried in mud, like the owner had rushed off without bothering to retrieve it. Something about it felt wrong, like whoever had been there didn't leave on their own terms. I didn't wait to find out. I turned right back toward my Jeep. But when I got back, I stopped cold. Parked just inches from my bumper was a black pickup truck. The windows were tinted so dark I couldn't see inside. I got the feeling, no, I knew someone was in there watching me. I didn't say a word. I climbed into my Jeep, started the engine, and got out of there as fast as I could. I drove for 3 straight hours until I found a lonely little gas station. Just one old pump standing in the gravel, the kind that takes forever to fill your tank. Nobody else was there, and the mountains stretched out forever in every direction. For a minute, I actually let myself relax. Then I heard tires on gravel. I turned. It was the same black truck. They pulled in and stopped on the opposite side of the pump, just a few feet from me. The engine cut off, but the door didn't open. I stood there, pretending to focus on the pump, my heart pounding in my chest. Why hadn't they gotten out? Why follow me all this way just to sit there? The second I had finished filling my tank, I climbed into my Jeep and drove off. I didn't look over. That night, I found another hidden trail to park on. This one felt safer, with no fresh tracks or signs anyone had camped there in weeks. I cooked a quick meal on my stove, watched the light fade through the trees, and told myself the whole thing was just a coincidence. Maybe they were just another traveler taking the same route. Still, I didn't set up my tent. I slept in the Jeep. Around midnight, I was lying in the back, watching videos I'd downloaded on my phone, when I heard the crunching sound of dry leaves underfoot. I set my phone down and sat up. And that's when it happened. A shadow suddenly appeared against my side window. I jumped back so hard I hit my head. The man vanished instantly into the darkness. But before I could catch my breath, another person suddenly tapped the back window. I scrambled into the front seat, fumbling for my keys. My hands felt useless, clumsy, like I was underwater. I could hear one of them checking the back handle, another tapping on the driver's side window. Finally, I jammed the key into the ignition. The Jeep roared to life as I tore down the trail. That's when my headlights reflected across the bushes. Parked there, half hidden, was the same black truck, waiting. I drove miles before I finally pulled over, locked the doors, and grabbed my phone. Service flickered between one bar and nothing. I called the police anyway, voice shaking. By the time I got through, the strangers were long gone. I never saw their faces, never got a license plate. It was too dark. The police couldn't do much with what little I told them. The next day, I got the window repaired in the nearest town and kept driving toward Alaska. I tried to convince myself it was over, that I'd never see that truck again. But even as the days passed and the scenery grew more beautiful, I couldn't relax. Every time I checked my mirrors, I half expected to see those dark, tinted windows following me. And the part that still chills me isn't the noise, the shattered window, or the shadows at my window. It's the question I'll never have an answer for. What exactly were those people planning to do, showing up in the middle of the forest, knowing someone was inside? I'd rather not know. When you're 19, you think you're untouchable. A night camping in the woods feels like an adventure, not a risk. But I learned the hard way that the most unsettling thing you can encounter out there isn't an animal. It's another person. It was the summer of 2021, and I was back at my mum's place during college break. Her property was located at the center of acres of thick forest, with no trails, no campsites, just endless trees. One lazy July afternoon, I decided, on impulse, to go camping out there. Just me, my backpack, and a night under the stars. I didn't think much of it. I grabbed a cheap tent, a blanket, some snacks, and my little camp stove. I told my mum I'd be out in the woods for the night, and she just laughed and reminded me to watch out for bears. I set out around 4 in the afternoon, walking deeper into the trees than I'd ever gone before. After about an hour, I stumbled into a clearing surrounded by tall pines, with just enough space for a fire. Perfect. I pitched my tent, cleared out the sticks and rocks, and started a little fire. As the sky started to turn orange, I leaned back against my pack, listening to the crackle of the flames. It was peaceful, exactly the kind of solitude I was hoping for. But just as the sun dipped below the tree line, I heard a voice. At first it was so faint I thought it was the wind, but then I heard it again. The sound carried strangely through the trees, so I couldn't tell where it was coming from. And these woods weren't the kind of place where you accidentally ran into people. There were no trails, no cabins, nothing. If someone else was out there, it was deliberate. I sat there frozen, staring into the shadows, waiting for whoever it was to pass by. But they didn't. I heard the voice again and waited for the newcomer to introduce themselves. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, still nothing. It was almost as though whoever it was wanted me to know they were there. Finally, I shouted, "Hello!" Everywhere suddenly went silent. It was the kind of silence that makes your stomach twist. I called out again. Nothing. The woods swallowed my words, and I was left sitting by the fire with my heart pounding. I told myself not to panic, but I couldn't shake the feeling of eyes on me. With maybe half an hour of light left, I decided I wasn't staying put. I packed up fast and moved. 15 minutes of stumbling through the trees, I stopped at another spot. It was just a flat patch between the trunks, but it would do. I got my tent up just as the last bit of daylight faded, then built another small fire. For a while, things felt normal again. I roasted marshmallows, made a couple of s'mores, and tried to enjoy the night. By midnight, the fire was burning low, and I was almost relaxed, until I heard footsteps. I spun around, staring into the dark, but the sound stopped. I called out, half hoping it was my imagination. That's when a man stepped into the light from my fire. He looked to be in his 30s, wearing a dark jacket, his hair greasy, his eyes locked on me. He smiled like we were old friends and walked towards the fire, settling near the flames as if he belonged there. He told me he didn't mean to startle me, but it didn't make me any more relaxed. I asked him if I could help him and told him he found the wrong campsite. He looked at me, still smiling faintly, and said just one word. No. That was it. No explanation, no apology. Just no. We sat in silence, the fire crackling between us. I didn't know what to do, so I blurted out the first thing that came to mind. I asked if he was talking out in the woods earlier. The smile slid off his face. He kept his eyes on the fire and muttered flatly, "Must have been someone else." It sounded like the same voice I'd heard. I knew it. Before I could react, I heard it again, a stick snapping just beyond the firelight. I turned toward the sound. The man didn't flinch, he just watched me. That's when I realized he wasn't alone. Someone else was out there, hidden just beyond the glow of the fire. When I looked back, the man was staring straight at me. His expression was blank, but his eyes cold, empty. Every instinct in me screamed to run. I rose in an instant, grabbed my pack, and bolted into the trees. Behind me, I heard him shout something, after which I heard the sound of incoming footsteps. Some branches snagged my clothes, but I kept pushing forward. Even in the dark, muscle memory carried me toward the edge of the property. Finally, I broke through the tree line and stumbled onto the dirt road behind my mum's house. I sprinted all the way to the back door, slammed it shut, and locked it. My mum woke up to me gasping for air, drenched in sweat. When I told her what happened, she immediately called the police. The next morning, a couple of officers followed me back to where I'd camped. My tent, my gear, the fire pit, it was all gone. Not just taken, but erased. Like nobody had been there at all. The cops didn't find anything. No footprints, no trash, no sign of the men. That night changed how I saw the woods forever. For months afterward, I couldn't even walk past the tree line without feeling my heart race. Every creak, every gust of wind brushing against the windows sent me straight back to that moment, that chilling stillness when I knew I wasn't alone. I tried telling myself it was just some drifter, maybe a hunter who wandered too far, but deep down, I didn't believe that. Hunters don't erase campsites. Strangers don't follow you silently through the woods just to vanish. Whatever those men wanted, they had planned it. Weeks later, one of the officers called to follow up. He said they'd found signs of an old, half-buried fire ring a few miles deeper into the forest. I tried to push the thought away, but I couldn't. The spot was almost directly in the direction I'd been running when I escaped. I couldn't stop thinking, what if I'd gone a little slower, or tripped once, and what if I'd ended up there instead? What if that clearing was never random, but one of theirs? Even now, when I visit my mum, I can't look out her kitchen window after dark. The woods seem to breathe differently at night, like they're remembering. I'll catch myself listening for footsteps, or that low murmur that first drew me in. Sometimes I think I see a faint glow between the trees, like a fire flickering in the distance. I tell myself it's nothing, maybe a camper, maybe the moonlight, but my gut knows better. There are places in this world that don't want you there. That clearing was one of them. And the next time someone lights a fire in those woods, I hope they realize it before the voices start calling. To this day, I don't know what they wanted. Maybe they were planning to take something, or perhaps I'm just overthinking. All I know is that they followed me, watched me, and sat at my fire like they belonged there. I've always liked to think of myself as someone who doesn't scare easily. I grew up around woods, spent plenty of nights camping with nothing but a flashlight and a thin tent between me and whatever was out there. But nothing prepared me for what happened the summer I worked the fire lookout. My name's Daniel, and when I was 21, I took a seasonal job at a lookout tower deep in the Appalachians. It was supposed to be simple. Scan the forest for smoke, record the weather, keep a logbook. Easy money, quiet hours, and a view that made you feel like you were standing above the whole world. The tower sat on a lonely ridge, a wooden skeleton with a small cabin perched on top. Inside there was a cot, a desk, a lantern, and windows on every side. During the day, it felt almost heavenly. The treetops spread out like a green ocean, mountains rolling off into the haze. But nights were different. When the sun slipped away and the forest drowned in black, the tower turned into something else. Up there, surrounded by glass, you felt exposed, like a fish in a bowl, visible to anything watching from below. I tried to shake that feeling during my first week. I told myself it was nerves, that I'd get used to the creaks of the wooden steps and the groan of the wind pushing against the frame. And for a while I did. I read books, made instant coffee, stared at the endless horizon. But then, things started happening. It was maybe my 10th night when I first noticed it. A shape. Far below, at the edge of the tree line. At first I thought it was just a tree stump catching the moonlight funny. But the longer I looked, the less sure I became. It was tall, darker than the trees around it, and it didn't seem to move. I sat at my desk, pretending to read, but every couple of minutes my eyes darted back to that spot. When dawn finally came, I squinted through the glass to see what it was. Nothing. Just brush and rocks where I swore I'd seen something. I told myself I'd imagined it due to lack of sleep and paranoia. But deep down, I knew better. A few nights later, it happened again. This time, the shape was closer. Not right under the tower, but near enough that I could make out a suggestion of arms. The moment I turned my lantern toward the window, it slipped back into the trees, like it had been waiting for me to notice. From that night on, I couldn't sleep properly. Every gust of wind brushing the glass made me flinch. I tried shutting the curtains, but that was worse. Because then I couldn't see if it was out there, and I started imagining it pressed right against the glass, inches from me. One night, near midnight, I was sitting with my back to the door when I heard it. The sound of footsteps on the staircase. Steady, deliberate, one after another, the boards whining under the weight. My heart nearly jumped out of my chest. I turned off the lantern and crouched by the window, holding my breath. The steps kept coming, closer and closer, until they stopped just below the trap door that led into the cabin. For a long time, nothing. I stayed frozen, staring at the shadowy square of the trapdoor, waiting for it to creak open. It never did. Eventually, after what felt like hours, I worked up the courage to flick my lantern back on. But I found nothing. The stairs outside were empty. The next morning, I climbed down to check for footprints. The ground was soft from a storm the night before, and sure enough, there were footprints. I can't explain the kind of dread that hit me then, knowing that someone was out there, moving around my tower in the middle of the night, without shoes. I considered calling it in, but what could I even say? Hey, I think the forest is stalking me. They'd laugh me out of the job. That afternoon, I radioed the nearest ranger just to make conversation, hoping for some kind of reassurance. But the signal was faint, almost drowned in static. The voice that crackled back didn't sound familiar. It wasn't my supervisor or any ranger I knew. It was slow, calm, too calm. "Stay inside the tower," it said. "Do not come down tonight." I tried to ask who it was, but the signal cut out before I could finish. When I checked the logbook later, the frequency I'd used wasn't even one of ours. I still don't know who or what answered me that day. All I knew was that as the sun set, that same silence began to crawl up the ridge again, swallowing the sound of everything alive. The final night I spent in that tower is burned into my memory. I'd tried to stay awake, but exhaustion caught up with me around 2 a.m. I must have dozed off at the desk because I woke to the sound of tapping on the glass. I sat up, heart hammering. The lantern had gone out, but the moon was bright enough to see shapes through the windows. And standing there, inches away on the other side of the glass, was a man. He wasn't moving. Just standing close to the window, his skin pale, his hair damp, his face pale, his hair damp, his gaze fixed on me. I stumbled back, nearly tripping over the cot, fumbling for anything I could use as a weapon. My hands closed around the heavy logbook, useless as it was, and when I looked back, he was gone. Just gone. But the tapping didn't stop. It moved, from one window to the next, as if he was circling the cabin, letting me know he could walk the entire perimeter, unseen, untouched. I've replayed that night 1,000 times, trying to convince myself it was a dream. But there's one detail that never changes. When I fled the next morning, I forgot the logbook. A week later, when another ranger took over, they mailed it back to me. No note, no explanation, just the logbook wrapped in brown paper. I opened it and flipped to the last page I'd written on. Below my handwriting, in shaky black ink, were 5 words I never wrote. Don't leave the light off. I got rid of it that same night, but sometimes I still see that sentence in my head when I wake up in the dark. I didn't sleep. I didn't even sit down. I stayed standing in the center of that little cabin until the first gray light of morning crept into the sky. And then I packed my bag, climbed down, and walked the trail back to the ranger station without once looking behind me. I told my supervisor I was done, that the isolation was messing with me. I left out the part about the barefoot prints and the tapping on the glass. He probably wouldn't have believed me anyway. It's been years since then, and I've never gone back to those mountains. But sometimes, when I'm lying awake at night, I swear I can hear it again. That faint, deliberate tap on the window. And I know, deep down, that whatever was watching me in that tower, it wasn't done. Not with me.